Deku was Ultimate Spider-Man Part 3. Now, I don't expect a lot of people to watch this, since Part 2 only got 90 views. Right now, at least last time I checked, it has 90 views. But we're not really gonna be talking about that. So, I did want to address something. One of my friends that watch my YouTube, they asked, why do you make so many Spider-Man what-ifs on Deku? Because, you barely make any other Spider-Man what-ifs on other characters. Like Callum, Bell, Kazuma, anybody like that. So I am going to do a Spider-Man what-if. Maybe do what if Spider-Man had a spider sense, or maybe what if Callum had spider abilities, or pretty much I was bit by the radioactive spider, or something like that. Now, this part I am going to be introducing a lot more villains, and I'm going to be introducing. So yeah, you guys can go in the comments, hit any suggestions you want. I may do them. Most likely I will, because every time you guys comment, I take that, and I act on it. Like anything you comment down below, I most likely will look at it. So it doesn't really matter. So yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say. I also am making a new series, Marvel House. Pretty simple. It's just a version, action figure version of pretty much anime house and not cartoon, but video game house, somewhat like pretty much I can't remember, but I'll put the picture up right here. But yeah, so this is what if Deku was Ultimate Spider-Man Part 3. Now this me personally, I think this is the best Spider-Man what if I've done so far, because I'm putting a lot of thought, and I'm going to be doing a lot of emotional stuff for this, and I'm going to be doing a lot more emotional and guided stuff in my what ifs now. So I'm going to be setting up story points and other things like that, like I'm doing with my current what if Deku was Homelander good version what if. And yeah, I am also doing for now, someone said, why you make so many Deku Spider-Man what ifs and you haven't finished them. Those are all canceled, because this is my main Spider-Man what if for Deku now. So if you see other what ifs I've done on what if Deku was Spider-Man, those don't count anymore. They're canceled. So I'm not making any more continuations of those stories. But this is what if Deku was Ultimate Spider-Man. I said it again, let's dive on into it and start the video. So let's start this fanfic. Now, last time I left off, Deku did pretty much pimp out or upgrade his vigilante suit to look more like the Homecoming Spider-Man suit, or the Scarlet Spider suit. And also, Deku did fight against Morbius, Shocker, and Sandman his last night of Vigilante, or one of his nights of Vigilante, after the pretty much combat training. Now, doing this, we will see that Deku would have gone back to school after that night, since he would be still kind of, shocked off about Shocker and also Morbius, since he wasn't able to catch Morbius and he got away. As we see that Deku would have gone back to school the next day, walking in the class 1A. As he would have been looking around, basically sitting down, as Deku would have been just chilling in there. As Ochako would have came towards Deku before class started, he pretty much started to talk to him. Deku would start to flirt with her a little bit, but still being somewhat like the nerdy Deku, as Deku would basically flirt with her back and forth. Eventually her, pretty much kind of having, or pretty much getting a crush for Deku. Now, Deku would have somewhat seen this, but he wouldn't be that confident in his skill to get a girlfriend. So Deku just played it off cool, as he would be talking to her for a solid 15 minutes. Eventually, Mineta bumping his head into, the mix, as he would start to talk to them, pretty much trying to break it up. As eventually Azawa would have walked in class. Azawa would have told the class to sit down, as they would have been told that they're going to the USJ. As they would have had their somewhat normal class, first half of the school day, normal class, as they would get on their way to the USJ. Them not meeting up with All Might, but All Might being in there, as Azawa would be told. As Azawa and the class would have taken the bus down to the USJ, Deku would have gotten off the bus. Now, originally they did still talk about their quirks. Deku just explained his quirk and not really doing anything more than that. He did flirt with Ochako on the bus, but nothing of the story changed too much when they were on the bus. As they get out of the bus and pretty much they walk into the USJ, as they still get the same speech by pretty much the 13, or pretty much 13, as Deku would be, just focusing on her, since he would still be a nerd. like in this universe, but he would have had his power sense go off as Deku started to look around vigorously, trying to figure out what was going on. As he would have looked, he would see a small black dot in midair, as it would have it was instantly expanded into a portal-like shape, as multiple villains would have started to gush out of the portal and started to barrage Azawa. As Azawa would keep the villains back as hard or as fast as possible, as he would tell 13 to get the students out of here. As 13 would have rushed the kids towards the door to try to get out of the USJ, as Kogiri would have stopped pretty much 13 and would have teleported her away, or basically would have just bodied her like he did in canon, as the students would still be teleported away in different sections. As Deku would see teleported near the water area where Froppy and Mineta were, as Deku would start to fall down. As Deku, while he's falling, he would have shot a web up on the ceiling of the USJ, stopping him from falling into the water, as he would be about 6 feet away from the water, as villains would start to jump out of the water, trying to get him like they're sharks and it's a piece of meat dangling over the tank. As they would have started to jump up and try to bite Deku off the web, as some of them would have shark-type quirks, as Deku would start to climb up his web, and would find pretty much Froppy, as he would make a type of web zip line to the boat across the water to the shore, as he would fall on the pretty much webbing rope, as he would be tightrope walking towards the boat, as he would just halfway seconds in, as some of the villains would try to pretty much clash or pretty much get Deku off of the web, as Deku would start to fumble around, as Deku would eventually stick his feet down to the web, as he would have started to walk a little bit quicker to the boat, grabbing Froppy and telling her that it's okay, as he would have grabbed Froppy and Mineta sticking himself on Froppy's back, so Deku would have to carry them bridal style, and basically he would carry Froppy bridal style, and Mineta would be sticking on the back of Deku's back. So basically Deku started to walk, and eventually he got to the shore, but they were barraged by villains, as villains would have seen Deku get on the shore, as about 6 to 7 villains would have started to barrage or try to come at Deku, as Deku would tell Froppy and Mineta to go, as he would have taken down the villains easily or semi-quickly, the same way Spider-Man normally takes down, thugs. He would just start to web them around, make quippy jokes, and overall just mess with them. Eventually, he would have taken them all down in a matter of about 10 to 5 minutes, as he would have webbed off, as Deku would have swung, and he would have landed about, let's say, 6 feet away from the Nomu, as he would have, noticed that All Might showed up, as he would be a little bit late to the whole thing, that everybody would be surprised that All Might showed up. He would be a little bit late, him landing next to Sugar Rush, as he would start to look around, as All Might would have started to fight against the Nomu after the Nomu would have bodied Azawa. As Nomu and Deku would have glanced at each other, the Nomu seeming like it was going after Deku, as All Might would have jumped in, stopping the Nomu then and there. As Deku would have seen All Might go ham on the Nomu, throwing punches, kicks, flips, and all sorts of other stuff. Not flips, but pretty much throwing immense power behind each punch, him trying to take down the Nomu as fast as possible, as they would have started to throw hands like freaking Goku and Vegeta. As Deku would eventually look closer and closer, eventually him seeing some sort of symbol or logo on the Nomu's back, as it would look similar to Oscorp, eventually him recognizing that it's definitely an Oscorp logo, as Deku would be completely confused of this, or completely confused in general, as Deku would just brush this off, as he would have looked closer and closer, eventually him being pushed back by Sugar Rush telling him to stay back, as Deku would have backed up, and the Nomu would eventually be defeated by All Might, him throwing a Detroit Smash, and pretty much destroying the top half of the Nomu, getting rid of the evidence, seeing that the Oscorp logo was at the base of the Nomu's spine, as since the top half of it was obliterated away, there was no evidence left of it coming from Oscorp. So after that, pretty much All Might would have been pushing himself to the limits, but it wouldn't be too much of a problem, as the students would get called back home and they would be out of school for about, let's say, 5 weeks. Not 5 weeks, 5 days. Deku would have would have pretty much just been doing homework and overall just tweaking with his web shooters and stuff like that. As Deku would be looking for crime, basically him having his vigilante suit on, as Deku would have gotten ready. As Deku would have gone on vigilante, pretty much was swagging and basically just overall looking over the pretty much city, doing nighttime or doing near the noon of his days off. As he would be the first night of the day off from UA, as he would swing out into the night, as he would have just been, taking down small time, robbers and also thugs and people like that. Other stuff like that, just small time crimes that Spider-Man can easily do without any effort. Now, eventually, Deku would come near the docks, him noticing that something was going down, as the deal was going down. About the opposite direction from the other dock area he came across, where he first fought, his first villain, Taskmaster. As Deku would have started to look over the pretty much building side or corner, as he would be looking at the whole deal from pretty much from afar. As Deku would look closer and closer, basically him turning on the LEDs in his lights, turning on the LEDs in his eyes, as he would have swung into the shadows, as he would have picked off each thug one by one, eventually only leaving about 3 near the pretty much man that was making the deal with an unknown person that couldn't even figure out who. As the unknown person would have stepped out of the limousine, as he would have pretty much shown himself to be Kingpin, one of the big time drug lords in Japan right now, at least, and also in America as well. As Deku would have realized that it was one pro hero that was constantly trying to gun for Kingpin, a pro hero in America going by the name of Daredevil. As Deku would have started to look closer, trying to figure out what was going on, as he would be, confused and overall shocked that Kingpin was in Japan right now, since he should be in America. So Deku would look closer, eventually him being pretty much interrupted as his spider sense would have gone off, as Deku would have dodged out of the way, pretty much doing a backflip out of the way from the area he was spying on them from. As he would have looked over at the area he was at, it was a shuriken right there. As Deku would have looked over his shoulder, as he would see a man in a white, pretty much cape with a skull mask, as he would have looked closer, and it would have been Taskmaster. Deku would start to fight Taskmaster, him realizing that, it was the guy, the first villain he fought, as he would have backed up more and more, and then he started to fight vigorously. Eventually, their fight pretty much getting so big as Kingpin and the other assailant that was making the deal figured out or really pretty much noticed them fighting near the dock areas, as Deku started to fight and throw crates upside Taskmaster's head, as he would have realized Taskmaster's quirk was somewhat of a copy quirk. He can copy any person's moves. As Deku started to fight Taskmaster left and right, throwing kicks, jabs, punches, and other things like that, as they would have been kicking each other at the same exact time, same exact place, and Taskmaster moving like he knew the move Deku was going to do before he even did it. As Deku would try to figure out a weak point to his quirk, as Taskmaster would have been fighting against Deku, him saying that I know everything you're supposed to do or everything you're about to do. Your fighting technique is weird, complicated, but it's very easily influenced by something. As Deku would have been kicked around, as majority of all Deku's fighting skills were some fighting skills he learned online, like kickboxing and other things like that. Just other, cheap hand-to-hand combat he can learn, like karate, slapboxing, and also boxing in itself. And also he did learn kickboxing a little bit. As Deku would basically, his majority of his other, the main part of his fighting technique was his fire sense. As Deku would try to not rely on his fire sense, as he would have started to rely on objects around him, not trying to throw a punch towards Taskmaster, trying to disorientate him, and trying to knock him out without laying a finger on him, trying to do a different tactic that Taskmaster never saw him do. As Deku would have to web up crates and other things like that, nearby objects, and started to swing them and crash them into Taskmaster's forehead, back, knees, as Taskmaster would have fell on both knees, basically him being bombarded with multiple objects, and other things like that you can find around the docks, hitting it upside Taskmaster's head. As Taskmaster would eventually be webbed down to the floor, him being trapped, as Deku would have told them to stop now, as they would be smuggling some sort of drug, something to, well, enhance quirks, as Deku would tell them to stop now, as the man in the other assailant with a green jacket would have dipped, basically telling them that they had to go, as the green assailant would have gotten into the car and they would have driven off, as they would have booked it, as Deku would try to go after them, but him seeing that Taskmaster was a bigger thing, Kingpin would be a bigger thing, as Deku would web over there, or not web over there, but would swing like a speed blitz, basically using his webs to propel himself towards Taskmaster, as Taskmaster was about to get up, as he would have knocked Taskmaster out with a quick jab or kick, as he would speed blitz right towards pretty much Kingpin, as he would start to fight against Kingpin, as Kingpin would have started to dodge more of Deku's attacks, surprisingly, as he would have punched a huge, big punch, basically pushing Deku back into the water near the docks, him punching Deku through the docks into the water, basically knocking Deku clean out. Hours later, Deku would emerge on the shore of Dago Beach, as Deku would have looked around, being very much confused on what happened. Deku would have gotten up and would have limped back home, as it would be about 6 o'clock, the sun coming up. As Deku would get out his civilian clothes from his backpack, surprisingly his backpack being waterproof, as Deku would put on some street clothes, like in this picture where Deku was having his hand up with the red backpack, as Deku would walk back home. As during this time, Taskmaster and Kingpin would have gotten away, since Deku would be out for hours and not even a single pro hero showing up. Doing this, Deku would have gone back home, and the next night Deku would have gone back to the docks to figure out what was going on, as he will look at, traces of blood he left behind by making Taskmaster bleed by breaking his nose a few times after he would have threw a canister or something towards Taskmaster's face, as he would have heard a big crack, as Deku would have started to reminisce about what happened last night, basically him trying to figure out what was left behind, as he saw a vial of the drug that they were, pretty much trafficking or giving away, or pretty much making a deal with, as Deku would have looked at it as it would be some sort of colorless type of substance, as it would have had some sort of X quirk Geno or something like that, as it would have a Oscorp logo on it, as Deku would realize, the Nomu, this new drug, and everything, as he would have walked off trying to figure out what was going on with Oscorp and why it was related with all these villain-like crimes, as Deku would have webbed off the Oscorp that night, as he would have broken in, or would have snuck in pretty much Dr. Osborne's room or office, as he would have looked through his files and other things like that, as the alarm would have went off immediately after he found one specific document that no one had clearance to, not even Harry Osborn. So doing this, pretty much we would see that Osborn would have woken up, him getting pretty much a message that his office has been broken into, and the police would have came onto the premises immediately, alongside a pro hero, aka a new pro hero that just came to Japan, calling himself Hawkeye, as this new pro hero would have been a pretty good pro hero, as his quirk would be called Arrow, as he would basically be able to, guide any arrow with a type of small scale telekinesis he would have, him being able to make arrows cross corners, go loop to loop, and even come back like a boomerang, and he just had to imagine what the arrow would have to do before he set it off. So yeah, as it would only be able to be telepathically moved as long as it was airborne. So that's the only downside on this new version of Hawkeye's quirk, but other than that, his quirk is similar to the same skill and speed as Hawkeye's original base, skill in the comics. Deku would be at Oscorp, basically trying to get out, as he would have punched through the window, as he would have webbed off, or would have the swing to the city trying to get away, as he would be tracked down by Hawkeye, as Deku would have been landed on a nearby building, as he would have walked around, basically trying to figure out where to hide, trying to wait out this whole thing since the police were all over him, as they wouldn't realize it was Spider-Man or the new vigilante people started to see as a hero, even though he wasn't really a legal hero yet, as people would still think he's a menace, such as this universe's version of James Jonas Jameson. Deku would be waiting it out in a nearby, pretty much, shed in the back of a house about 2 miles away from his, as Deku would start to look around, as he would have left a trail of webbing in the neighborhood, eventually leading to the house, as Hawkeye would have broken into the house, as the owner there wouldn't be pretty much there, since this house would be under construction, and the only thing that was built was the backside of the house and the shed, as Deku would have been laid out in there, as Hawkeye would have kicked down the door of the shed, seeing Deku in the middle of it, shooting an arrow towards him. As Deku would have dodged the arrow, seeing that the arrow was getting closer and closer to him no matter where he dodged, as he would just catch the arrow before it hit the ground or before it hit him, since it did do a turn right as soon as Deku dodged it. As Deku would grab the arrow, as he would chuck it football style towards pretty much Hawkeye, as Hawkeye would have dodged the arrow, as he would start to shoot barrages of arrows towards Deku, as Deku would start to dodge most of them, trying to at least, but most of them being webbed up to the ground or him catching them in midair. As Deku would be able to get Hawkeye off of his tail, to him at least, but Hawkeye still beating on his tail, as Deku would be swinging through the city, as Hawkeye would be using grapple arrows to catch up with Deku. As Deku would eventually try to figure out a flaw to his technique of him catching Deku or going after him, Deku would have looked at pretty much Hawkeye, eventually him looking around and taking a huge big flip or big pretty much swing around, what was it? This, because it was swinging around this area, this building with the huge light in the middle of it, he would basically be swinging around near that. So he would have done that big swing, losing Hawkeye, as Hawkeye would have almost fell off the building, as he would have landed near, surprisingly, luckily, a pillow factory, as he would have landed into a batch of pillows, surviving the fall, as he would have gotten out the batch of pillows, leaving the pretty much, factory, as he would have looked around, seeing that Deku was gone. As Deku would, sneak back into his house, as Deku would have closed the door, as he would have gotten out of his, pretty much, vigilante suit, as he would have gone to sleep that night, or the rest of that night, about 3 hours in the night, still being able to, for him to go to sleep. So the next day, since he would be off of school, he would just be sleeping the majority of the day. Deku would wake up in near 12, as Deku would have wake up about around 3. As Deku would go out, just get something to drink, him just being like this in the, pretty much thumbnail, him looking like this in public with the glasses, the earbuds, and the hoodie, everything like that. As Deku would be walking down the street, as he would bump into Ochako, and he would start to talk to her a little bit. As he would talk to her and kind of flirt with her a little bit, eventually him kind of liking her, as he would already like her a little bit, as he would start to flirt with her more and more, eventually them kind of getting closer. As Deku would start to flirt with her a little bit, and he started to, very much ask her out on a date. As the next day, that night, Deku wouldn't do any real vigilante work, as Deku would just go to sleep that night, looking for a good, long night's rest. As Deku would have woken up the next day and gone on his date with Ochako, nothing really stopping him from going on his date, as he would have had on his date with Ochako, basically just, flirting with her a little bit, and basically eventually them having a pretty good date. Near the end of their date, they would have heard some big crash, and they would be near a restaurant, not a restaurant, but yeah, pretty much near a diner area, as they would have heard a big crash, as they would have looked out the window, as it would have been Shocker from those nights ago, as Deku would have recognized Shocker, as he would start to make a bank heist in broad daylight. As Deku said he had to go to the restroom, as Deku would put on his vigilante suit, it being tucked very tightly underneath his street clothes, as Deku would start to swing after Shocker, after the police were doing a car chase on him. As Deku knew it was a big risk doing some hero work out in broad daylight with his, vigilante whole thing going on, as Deku webbed out or would have swung after Shocker, as he would have seen an arrow come or glaze right past him, as he would have looked, and it would be Hawkeye on a police car, him shooting arrows from afar towards the villain plus Deku as well, trying to get 2 birds with one stone. As Daku would have started to swing faster and faster, him eventually catching it with Shocker and his group of gang of pretty much misfits that were helping him, as it would have been Shocker, a couple other thugs that had 2 quirks, and these 2 thugs, pretty much their quirks, they had a electro quirk, a small scale electricity quirk that can only like shock people with about 10 volts, and another person that had a slide quirk, him being the C tier, pretty much villain that Daku, or not the C tier villain that Spider-Man fights in the comics, called Slide. And if you don't know who Slide is, his power or his suit in the comics is able to pretty much be frictionless. So he basically is like a untouchable person. You can't get any friction off him. So he slides literally everywhere, and pretty much Spider-Man's webs just fall off of him. So this universe, Slide's power is a quirk, and he would still have the suit on. I'll put a picture up right here. Now basically what would happen is Daku would have started to fight against these villains, as he would have rushed up into the van, since they would be driving in a van, as Daku was to fight around them. As the 10-volt Shocker dude, whatever, with his powers, he would just kick him out with one punch, as he would look around, as he would see Slide, as he would start to fight with Daku, as Daku would try to web him up, as he'd see that his webbing would just fall right off of him starting to get jumped by Shocker and Slide, as it would just be a third person there with no quirk driving them or getting them away as a getaway driver. As Daku uses webbing to steer the truck or steer the van near Dago Beach, then falling into the sand, as Daku would have gotten out of the beach, and I got out of the pretty much van by kicking the top of the van off, throwing Slide and throwing Shocker out of the van, and Shocker would start to blast waves of energy towards Daku, pushing him back, as Daku would have gone back up, as pretty much Shocker would start to barrage him with a blast of energy alongside Slide, throwing multiple type of trinkets and gadgets like shocking pellets and also freezing pellets, like those little foam stuff Hawkeye and Green Arrow used to trap people. Basically Daku started to get trapped by his feet in the sand, and basically Daku would try to get out, as he would eventually look around, as he would have said wait, as he would just put his feet up since it would be in the sand, as it would be connected to the sand, as Daku would break through the pretty much foam on his legs, as he would have ran straight towards Shocker, grabbing Shocker's fist and breaking his elbows. Not breaking it, but breaking his wrist, as Daku would throw Shocker down to the ground and knocking out Slide with one kick upside the forehead. As Daku would have taken them down, as Daku would have seen Hawkeye eventually show up in Dago Beach stairs, as he would walk down, or pretty much walk down the stairs, him looking around for Daku, but seeing the pretty much villains knocked out and Daku gone. As Daku would have swung back to the house, him realizing that he left the Chaku behind, as he would have swung right back to the diner, as he would have put back on his put on his street clothes, as he would have walked to the bathroom, basically him saying I'm sorry, too much last night. His mom could something. Basically him just making, funny little quippy jokes, as Otaku would have started to flirt back with Daku, and eventually pretty much what happened, let's say Daku gets her, pretty much started to talk to Daku a little bit more, eventually her asking Daku out on a date, next week, as Daku would have accepted, and basically they would have kissed, and they would have, pretty much met their separate ways after Daku would have walked her home, as pretty much Daku would have walked off, him feeling kind of happy into himself, kind of feeling himself a little bit, as Daku would have walked back home. As he would have walked back to the house, as Daku would have started to walk down the street, as he would hear, pretty much, explosions happening in the background, or explosions happening deep into Japan City. As Daku would have put on his vigilante suit, as Daku put on his vigilante suit, swinging through the city, as he would meet where the explosion happened, as he would see Hawkeye nearly almost dead, as he wouldn't be dead, but he would be severely burned on his legs and arm, as he would be on the ground bleeding vigorously, as his bow and arrow would have been broken, as he would see other pro heroes such as the pro hero calling himself a Daredevil that was in America but just came to Japan a couple months ago. As Daku would see other pro heroes, some B-listers and C-listers, also seeing Miss Joke and Midnight laid out on the ground, and basically him looking around, seeing a man in a green scaly suit with purple pajamas over it, and basically looking around. As at first the suit would look like the person's skin, as it would look very organic like, as this villain, this silhouette would look at Deku, basically looking at him saying, "So you're the one that broke into my office." As he would look at Deku saying, "What did you take, boy? What did you see?" As he would start to laugh in between each sentence and each word he said, as it would have some sort of psychotic meaning behind every word that came out of his mind or came out of his mouth. As Deku would look at him and basically back up a little bit, and him getting to a fighting stance, and him looking at the guy basically webbing up there or swinging up into the sky, as the guy would be on his glider as he would swing over towards him, as it would be fire and wreckage everywhere, as Deku would basically jump on top of pretty much pieces of rubble or pieces of broken down buildings near them, as Deku would eventually get towards the guy on the glider, as he would start to fight him on the glider, as fist punches, kicks, flips, and other things like that, basically trying to stay on the glider and also taking down the guy or trying to fight him. As he would see that the guy was at the same level of strength as him, punching him with each punch, kick, and pretty much dodge, it got harder and harder for Deku to keep it with the guy, as the guy would start to laugh psychotically, as he looked at the Deku and basically would have looked at Deku and he would say, "Huh," and basically him seeing that you're a fine specimen, your power is incredible, very strong, as he would have started to dodge more attacks with Deku, easily toying with him a little bit, as Deku would start to dodge more attacks from him as well, using his Fire Sense, as eventually the guy would get tired of this and taking some sort of pumpkin-like bomb thing the size of an apple and would have chucked it in Deku's face, blowing him off of the glider, as Deku would have fell near Daku Beach since they would be flying over Daku Beach, as Deku would have landed on some junk that was left on Daku Beach, landing on a pile of scrap, pretty much one of the pieces of scrap, stabbing right towards Deku's foot or stabbing right through Deku's thigh, as Deku would yell out in pain, as Deku would have found his way and pretty much clawed his way out of the pieces of scrap metal, as he would have pulled out the piece of metal that was on his leg, it being covered in rust, as Deku would pretty much limp off, as since Deku's self-healing and other things like that and his very stronger immune system, he was able to overpower the whole tetanus thing he would get from this rusty piece of metal, and he did have his tetanus shot already, and basically pretty much Deku's immune system was way stronger than the average human, so Deku didn't get pretty much tetanus from this. So yeah, so basically Deku started to limp back home, leaving a trail of blood, him not really swinging to his house as he would take a nearby shortcut. As Deku would walk through the sludge villain tunnel, as he was lay down, almost dying from blood loss, as Deku would web up his foot, as he would web up his thigh, trying to stop the bleeding, as Deku would lay down there, as he would look up, as he would see the same guy on the glider, Green Goblin. As this universe's Green Goblin would have looked like the Fortnite Green Goblin, basically Green Goblin would have looked over Deku's body, as Deku would look at Green Goblin, as he would have said, let's see who's under that mask. As Deku would be on the ground, almost about to die since blood loss and also being extremely beaten up because he would take a lot of punches and bruises towards his pretty much an abdomen and his face by Green Goblin, as Deku hood and his mask would start to get pulled off, as Deku would have looked at pretty much Green Goblin in one last effort of strength to try to keep his secret identity a secret, as he would have punched Green Goblin with all the strength he had left, almost breaking Green Goblin's whole chin off, as multiple of his teeth would have fell out alongside his jaw being dislocated. As Deku, if he was a little bit stronger, he would have ripped or blew a whole chunk of Green Goblin's face clean off, like he did, or like Superior Spider-Man did to Scorpion in the comics, as Goblin would have backed up, yelling out in pain. Somewhat of you can hear it, like it would kind of like you can sound it out that he was screaming, but you couldn't really make sure. Like, you know, he was like, it was a muffled scream because his mouth was all jacked up. As Green Goblin would have looked at Deku, would have chucked 2 goblin bombs towards him and would have dipped out of the sludge villain tunnel, having this tunnel collapse on itself, Deku being caught under some rubble, with it having, you know, with pretty much sewage water pretty much flowing over his body as it was about to drown him. As Deku would be there, lifeless, basically almost dead, as Deku would try to overpower through this. As Deku would get closer and closer to death, as he would eventually realize that his mother still needed him. His parents couldn't just die for no reason. For him to die like this, acting or trying to be a hero when he's not even a hero yet. As Deku tries to think, what can he do? He's too weak to do anything. As Deku tries to push the rubble off of him not being strong enough, as Deku would have thought long and hard on why he should live. As Deku has people that love him in the world, like his mother. Ochaku, he started a whole new relationship with Ochaku, and overall he has friends and a family, and he can't just die now. He can't just leave them now, especially not his mom at this point in her life, not at this critical point of her mourning over Deku's dead father. As Deku can't let himself die like this. He can't have his mom be known to be the mother of a vigilante that killed himself or died because he was too weak to save himself. As Deku would push every last bit of his muscle together, as he would muster up as much strength as he possibly could, as Deku would start to push and push and push until his body started to give out, as his muscles literally stopped working, as his body would be going through so much pain, as he would start to chant the words his father told him before he died. With great power comes great responsibility. As Deku would pretty much channel every last bit of strength, muster up every last bit of willpower to push the rubble off of him, pretty much pulling off the same thing Tom Holland did in the, pretty much abandoned warehouse that, Vulture left him in. As Deku would push the rubble straight off of him, as Deku would swing off and basically go after Green Goblin, as he would lose a trail off of Green Goblin, seeing that he was gone. As Deku would just went back to his house, as he would have taken off his, vigilante suit, as he would have started to think about, why is he still even vigilante? He's already on his way to become a pro hero. Why is he still doing this? He could have died outside. He could have died today. As Deku thinks about throwing the suit away, as he throws it into the trash can of his room, putting a lid over it, and not thinking about it anymore. As Deku would come to sleep at night, basically him, tending to his wounds by the first aid kit in his house, as he would have put it on his, leg, and basically put some bandages around his leg, and also started to fix up his body, as he would have some burns on his chest and face, since his suit would kind of be busted because it would have, explosion marks and other scuffs on it. As Deku would come to sleep at night, being straight up, beaten, he would be tired. As I'm gonna leave it off here, guys. So I hope you guys enjoy the video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Now part 4 will be a lot more at stake, and Deku, let's just say I might kill Deku off in part 4. I don't know. I can't know. I love this series too much. So yeah, so in part 4 I will be introducing a lot more villains, and by the time part 6 runs along, Sinister 6 will be a part of this story. So in part 4 I will be introducing Dr. Kurt Connors, or I already introduced him in the story. So Lizard, I will be introducing Lizard, Rhino, and a couple others are part of the Sinister 6 in this story later on, alongside other MCU or other Marvel characters. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. And as always, guys, have a blessed day. Deuces.